I actually stumbled onto this while doing research on something completely unrelated. I was looking into off-grid water systems a few years back, fell down a rabbit hole, and ended up reading about a physicist I'd never heard of, and a principle that stopped me cold. Before I go any further, the build I'm going to show you in this video costs $15. Every part is on Amazon or AliExpress. I'll tell you exactly what to buy, where to get it, and how to put it together. And I mean that literally because a 12-year-old can assemble this in about 30 minutes. I called a friend that same evening I discovered it. We were both genuinely excited in the way you get excited when something feels like it shouldn't be this simple. We ordered the parts. They arrived in a few days. We built it. It worked exactly the way it was supposed to. My friend was so into it that he didn't stop there. But more on that in a minute. First, let me tell you where this actually comes from. In 1977, NASA launched two spacecraft toward the outer solar system. No solar panels. At that distance from the sun, solar panels are useless. No batteries. Batteries die, no fuel, no combustion, no moving parts of any kind. Just two chunks of metal with a temperature difference between them. That temperature difference has been generating electricity continuously for nearly 50 years. As of 2022, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 are still transmitting data from beyond the edge of the solar system, powered by a principle that a German physicist figured out in 1821 that NASA turned into a working power system in the 1960s, and that you can replicate for about $15 from parts on Amazon right now. Nobody talks about this. We're going to fix that. The principle is called the Seebeck effect. Thomas Seebeck discovered it in 1821. When two different conductive materials are joined and one side is hot while the other is cold, voltage appears across the junction. No chemical reaction, no combustion, no moving parts, just hot on one side, cold on the other, and electricity flows. The bigger the temperature gap, the more electricity you get. That's it. Seebeck published it, the science community understood it, and for about 100 years it sat on the shelf because cheap electricity from burning coal was easier. Then two things happened. The Soviets needed to power over 1,000 unmanned lighthouses and navigation beacons along the Arctic coast. No electrical grid, no one around to refuel anything. They built thermoelectric generators using the Seebeck effect with a radioactive heat source. Set it, leave it, come back in a decade. Over 1,000 of them were deployed by the late 1980s. Then NASA needed to power spacecraft going where the sun is too far away for solar panels. Voyager 1 and 2 each carried three of these generators, 470 watts at launch. Nearly 50 years later, they're still running at around 220 watts each. Zero moving parts, zero maintenance. Temperature difference, the same physics, 200 years old, still powering spacecraft right now. So, why don't you know about it? Because in the 20th century, utility companies built a grid. The grid was convenient, and cheap electricity made personal power generation feel unnecessary. The thermoelectric effect got kept alive in NASA programs and military applications, but it never made it to your hardware store. Not because it doesn't work, because there's no money in telling you that a $15 module on your wood stove generates electricity from heat you're already producing and completely wasting. The utility company charges the average American household about 16 cents per kilowatt hour, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. The actual cost to generate that power is a fraction of that number. That gap funds an infrastructure you don't own and an industry with no incentive to tell you any of this. Now here's the build. The component is called a TEG module, thermoelectric generator. The most common one for DIY use is the TEC-HE1 12706. About $8 on Amazon or AliExpress. It's a small ceramic and metal tile, roughly the size of a large postage stamp, and about as thick as 4 credit cards stacked together. Inside are 127 pairs of semiconductor elements. Bismuth telluride, the same material family Seebeck was experimenting with. Hot side on the bottom, cold side on top. Temperature difference makes electricity. At a temperature difference of around 60 degree hours C between the two faces, which a wood stove surface achieves easily, the module produces about 3 volts. That's not quite enough to charge a phone on its own. So you add a DC-DC USB voltage booster, $5, which takes that low voltage and steps it up to a clean 5V USB output. Connect the module to the booster, plug your phone cable into the booster. You're now charging your phone from firewood. Total cost, $50. The stove was already burning. You were already wasting every bit of that heat. Here's how to get the most out of it. Place the TEG module flat on the stove surface with a thin layer of thermal paste between them. The same stuff used between a computer processor and its cooler to maximize heat transfer. On the top of the module, attach a small aluminum heat sink to keep that surface as cool as possible. The bigger the gap between the two sides, the more voltage you generate. A light breeze across the heatsink makes a real difference. 2 or 3 modules wired together can charge a phone faster and run a small LED light at the same time. Now back to my friend. After we built the first one together, he went quiet for a few weeks. Then he sent me photos. He'd spent about $200 building a proper multi-module array. 8 TEG tiles, a better booster circuit, a small sealed battery bank to store the output. He mounted the whole thing on the flue pipe of the wood stove in his off-grid cabin in the hills where he spends most of his weekends between October and April. The system runs continuously anytime there's a fire going. It powers his LED lighting throughout the cabin, keeps his phone and radio fully charged, and trickle charges a battery bank he uses to run a small water pump. He has not paid for any of that electricity. The stove was already there. The firewood was already burning. He just stopped throwing the energy away. That cabin setup is one of the most natural fits for this technology at a medium scale. But the wood stove is only one way in. Here are a few others that are completely doable right now. Van life and overlanding. A TEG module mounted against the exhaust housing or firewall near the engine generates electricity anytime you're driving. Heat that's currently going nowhere. It won't replace your alternator, but it silently supplements your battery bank the entire time you're moving. No extra wiring, no panels to angle at the sun, nothing to maintain. Camping with a fire or camp stove. A single module and a voltage booster fits in a jacket pocket. Set it on the edge of your camp stove. Prop the heat sink side up for airflow, and you have a phone charger running on whatever you're already cooking over. No battery pack to remember to charge before you leave. No searching for a solar angle in a shaded forest campsite. Remote hunting and fishing cabins. Small shelters that get used seasonally with a propane heater or wood stove are perfect candidates. The heat is already there. A $50 TEG setup keeps radios, GPS units, and headlamps charged for the whole season without hauling batteries in or running a generator. Sailboats and small powerboats. A TEG array near the diesel exhaust line generates supplemental power anytime the engine runs. Genuinely useful for keeping battery banks topped up on longer passages when solar input is limited by weather, season, or the angle of the rig shadow across your panels. And then there's the one that surprises everyone, the compost pile. An active compost pile in full decomposition reaches 55 to 70 degrees on the inside. The outer surface stays cooler. That's a real temperature difference you can harvest. A module at the interface with leads running to a small booster can power a soil moisture sensor, a garden timer, or a small light off the biological heat of rotting plant material. No burning, no fuel, no sunlight required. Just biology doing what biology does, and you catching the energy on the way out. None of this replaces your utility bill. One module won't run your refrigerator, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. What it does is make something clear that the energy industry has never had a reason to advertise. That the waste heat you're already producing from equipment you already own, using physics that's been understood for 200 years, can be turned into usable electricity for 15 ons. And once you understand how it works, you start seeing heat sources everywhere. The $15 build on your wood stove is just the first one. The Voyager probes are currently about 15 billion miles from Earth. They are still sending data home. They run on a temperature difference. The same principle, the same physics that Seebeck wrote down in 1821. You can build your first version before the end of the week. If this story changes the way you look at the waste heat in your home, or the simple physics of the world around you, please subscribe and like the channel. We are uncovering the history and technology that they have tried to keep in the shadows. Let's power the future together. The next hidden treasure of science will be revealed soon.